What if a 10-year-old could outsmart the smartest man in the world? And what if that same girl held the key to something that could change the future of space travel forever? That was the voiceover for a video that went viral practically overnight. But before the internet went crazy, before the news anchors scrambled to get interviews, and way before Elon Musk himself tweeted, "I just got outclassed by a 5th grader," there was just a girl. A quiet, bright-eyed girl named Emma Parker who nobody saw coming. It all started in a sleepy town in Colorado. A place where the mountains kissed the sky, the internet sometimes cut out in the middle of class, and dreams of reaching the stars felt more like distant fairy tales than real-life goals. Emma was sitting on the worn-down couch in her mom's garage, yes, garage, not living room, tinkering with a busted coffee maker she found in a thrift store. Sparks flew, literally, but Emma didn't flinch. She pulled her goggles down, grinned, and made a note in her little blue notebook: reverse heating element polarity. Try magnet coil instead. She wasn't like the other kids at West Pine Elementary. While they were obsessed with TikToks and Roblox, Emma devoured books on propulsion systems and space-time theory. Her walls weren't filled with boy band posters, they were covered in blueprints, scribbles of equations, and a giant photo of the Falcon Heavy launch she'd watched 100 times. That afternoon, something unusual happened. Mrs. Torres, her science teacher, walked into class with a flyer in hand and a spark in her eye. "All right, future Einsteins," she said, holding up the paper, "listen up. This year's National STEM Rising Stars Challenge is unlike anything we've seen before. The winner gets a summer internship, not just a tour, an internship, at SpaceX." The room exploded in noise. Even the kids who didn't know the difference between a circuit and a sandwich perked up. Emma's heart skipped. She sat straight up, eyes locked on that flyer like it was a golden ticket to the universe. Mrs. Torres continued, "It's open to students ages 10 to 17. You'll work in teams or solo to solve a real-world engineering problem. You'll design, present, and, get this, your work will be evaluated by a panel of scientists and Elon Musk himself." The name hit the room like thunder. Even the class clown, Jason Blake, raised an eyebrow. "Wait, the Elon Musk?" Jason said. "Like the Tesla guy?" Mrs. Torres nodded. "Yup. The SpaceX guy. The Neuralink guy. The Starlink guy. The guy who's trying to send people to Mars." Emma barely breathed. Her fingers tingled with electricity. This wasn't just a contest, it was destiny knocking. At recess, most kids talked about who they'd team up with or what they'd wear if they won. Emma, on the other hand, sat alone under the big oak tree with her notebook, already sketching ideas. She didn't need a team. She wanted to do this alone. Ben Jacobs, her best, and pretty much only, friend, jogged over and flopped down next to her. "You're going for it, aren't you?" Emma looked up, a soft smile playing at her lips. "Of course I am. You know Jason's entering too, right? And probably with half the science club." "I don't care," she said simply, flipping another page. "This isn't about beating anyone. This is about getting there." Ben raised an eyebrow. "Getting where?" She looked to the sky. "Up there." The clouds drifted lazily across the blue, like they knew something the rest of the world didn't. For a moment, Ben didn't say anything. He'd always admired Emma's wild dreams, even if they felt impossible. "I'll help however I can," he said. Emma nodded, already a million miles away in her mind, where rockets lifted off and dreams broke through the stratosphere. Later that night, Emma burst through the front door of their small home, her cheeks flushed. "Mom! You won't believe this." Her mother, greasy hands deep in a carburetor, looked up from the kitchen table, which doubled as her mini repair shop. "Let me guess, aliens finally sent an invite?" Emma laughed, breathless. "Better. There's a contest. A national contest. If I win, I get to intern at SpaceX. Elon Musk is one of the judges. Her mom blinked, wiping her hands on a rag. SpaceX? Are you serious? I'm dead serious, Emma said, pulling the flyer out of her backpack like it was the Declaration of Independence. I have a shot. Her mom took the paper, eyes scanning it slowly. Then she looked at Emma. You really think you can win this thing? I know I can. I've been working on ideas for months. I just didn't know where to put them. This is it. Her mom paused. Okay. But this won't be easy. There's going to be a lot of smart kids with expensive tutors and private schools behind them. You'll be the underdog. Emma didn't blink. I like being the underdog. No one sees you coming. Her mom chuckled, ruffling her hair. All right, genius. Let's do this. And just like that, the spark was lit. But what Emma didn't know, what no one knew, was that this contest would lead to a chain of events no one could have predicted. Not even Elon Musk. Not even the world's most powerful algorithms. Because sometimes the most incredible stories don't come from the top, they come from a 10-year-old girl with a busted coffee maker, a second-hand notebook, and a dream so big the stars themselves had to stop and take notice. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Before all the headlines, the interviews, and the disbelief of a world watching a kid genius rewrite the rules, there was just Emma. Emma Parker was born on a Tuesday morning in late October, a month her mom always said was full of storms and stars. Her birth wasn't dramatic. No newsworthy moment. No cameras. Just a tired, 21-year-old single mom holding her baby girl in a small hospital room in Grand Junction, Colorado, whispering, "You're going to do big things, kid. I can feel it." Her mom, Rachel Parker, worked as a car mechanic. She didn't have a college degree or a savings account, but she had grit, heart, and a wrench that could fix just about anything. Emma grew up around the smell of motor oil and old rock music blasting from a dusty radio. Most kids got bedtime stories, Emma got engine breakdowns and torque specs, told in a way only a mom who wanted her daughter to dream bigger could tell them. Emma didn't speak much as a toddler, but she was always watching. Always taking things apart. When she was 4, she dismantled the family microwave just to figure out how the rotating plate worked. By 6, she'd rewired her nightlight to glow green instead of white because, in her words, it makes the shadows look friendlier. Her school didn't know what to do with her. She wasn't a problem kid, just one of those students who seemed to live half in this world, and half in another one entirely. A world of possibilities, equations, and questions most 10-year-olds didn't even think about. Her mom used to joke, "Emma's gonna ask how the moon works, then try to build her own." But while Emma's imagination was cosmic, her life was grounded by limitations. They didn't have much. Their house was small. Her laptop was second-hand and missing 3 keys. Their internet went down every time it snowed too hard, which was basically all of December through February. But her mom made sure Emma always had access to what she needed most: books, tools, and belief. One of the few people at school who truly saw Emma was Mrs. Torres. A former NASA lab assistant turned science teacher. After budget cuts, she spotted Emma's potential early. After class one day, she handed Emma a worn copy of Astrophysics for People in a Hurry and said, "You're gonna get this more than half the adults I know." Emma devoured it in 2 days. Still, being the smart girl came with a price. Kids whispered about her. Some called her a robot. Others said she was weird. Jason Blake, her future rival, once laughed when he saw her working on a homemade model rocket at recess and said, "You know girls don't go to space, right?" Emma didn't respond. She just added, "Fuel line needs better insulation," to her notebook and kept building. Ben Jacobs was the one person who never looked at her like she was from another planet. He was awkward, had a backpack twice his size, and carried a Rubik's Cube wherever he went. Emma and Ben became friends in first grade after he asked if she thought aliens existed. Her answer: probably. But if they're smart, they're avoiding Earth. They'd been inseparable ever since. He wasn't as into science as she was, but he got her, and in Emma's world, that meant more than anything. As the Rising Stars competition approached, Emma started spending even more time in the garage-turned-workshop. She was designing a propulsion system based on an idea she'd been tinkering with for months, a hybrid between ion thrusters and electromagnetic rails. She called it the feather drive because, in her words, it floats before it flies. Her mom would peek in at night, sometimes bringing hot cocoa, sometimes just standing in the doorway, watching Emma scribble equations on the whiteboard. "You sure you're okay?" Rachel would ask. Emma would nod, not looking up. "Almost got it. I can feel it." And Rachel would smile, close the door, and whisper to herself, "You really are gonna build that moon." But what Rachel didn't know, what even Emma didn't fully understand yet, was that this wasn't just about winning a contest. This was about something deeper. This was about proving that where you come from doesn't define how far you can go. The flyer was taped to the classroom door for 3 days straight before Emma finally took it down and brought it home. It felt like more than a piece of paper, it felt like a mission. The National STEM Rising Stars Challenge wasn't just another school event. It was a shot at something so few people ever got to taste: possibility. The rules were simple on paper, but daunting in reality. Goal: solve a real-world engineering problem related to sustainability in space travel. Submission: prototype design, video explanation, and a written proposal. Deadline: 4 weeks. Judges: a panel of engineers, scientists, and Elon Musk himself. Emma taped the flyer next to her workbench, right under her poster of the first Falcon 9 rocket landing. Every time she looked up, it reminded her, this is real. She barely slept that first weekend. Her desk was covered in open textbooks, sheets of scrap paper, and failed 3D, printed models of thrusters. Her mom kept poking her head in and asking, "You eating today?" to which Emma would usually respond with a distracted, "I think so." Ben came over Saturday afternoon and dropped his backpack with a thunk. "Okay, genius. What's the plan?" Emma looked up, eyes wild with ideas. "Okay. So, you know how ion thrusters are super efficient but super slow? And how chemical rockets are fast but not sustainable for deep space travel?" Ben blinked. "Sure." Emma pulled out a sketch. "What if we combined them? Like, use electromagnetic rails to give the ship an initial boost, and then switch to ion propulsion once it's clear of Earth's gravity. Less fuel, more distance. I've been calling it the feather drive." Ben squinted at the drawing. "Feather like light as a feather." "Exactly. It glides. No brute force. Just smart physics." He nodded. "Okay. But isn't that, like, really hard to build?" Emma shrugged. "I don't need to build the whole thing. Just enough to show the concept. If I can simulate it, maybe even do a partial scale model, that'll get their attention." Ben smirked. "Or you'll blow up the garage. Both outcomes are exciting." At school, the contest buzz reached new levels. Posters went up in the halls, and the science club was hosting brainstorming meetups every lunch period. Jason Blake, the self-declared tech king of West Pine, was already boasting about his team's next-level AI navigation system. "Face it," he said loudly in the cafeteria, "they're gonna want something big. Not some recycled science fair project." Emma, sitting 2 tables away, clenched her jaw but didn't respond. She knew Jason. He liked to talk big. But more than that, he hated being shown up. And last year, when Emma's homemade Mars rover beat his drone in the Science Expo, he hadn't let it go. Now he was forming a team of older students, some from the high school, using software and hardware Emma didn't have access to. He had connections, money, and support from the robotics coach. All Emma had was Ben. And an idea she believed in. The pressure started to creep in. Every morning, Emma felt the clock ticking. Every evening, she sat staring at simulations that refused to behave. Her prototype, made from scavenged parts and 3D printed components, was clunky. The magnetic launcher she'd built kept overheating. The solar ion model she coded wouldn't align with the test results. She was getting frustrated. And worse, she was getting scared. What if she'd aimed too high? What if the judges didn't even look at her project because she was just a kid? What if Jason was right? Ben noticed the change. One afternoon, after a particularly failed test launch, he sat with her in the garage while Emma sulked on a milk crate, staring at the mess. "You're too quiet," he said. "I'm just thinking." "No, you're doing that thing where you spiral. You think you're failing even though you're, 10 steps ahead of everyone." Emma sighed. "I don't have the tools Jason has. I don't have a lab. I don't even know if the math behind this is good enough." Ben leaned forward. "You don't need a fancy lab. You have something way better than that." Emma raised an eyebrow. "What?" He smiled. "You." At the end of the third week, submissions were due in 7 days. Emma hadn't slept more than 4 hours a night. Her prototype still wasn't perfect, but the simulation was clean. She'd filmed her video explanation 3 times and re-recorded her voiceover until it was smooth, confident, and clear. She added a line at the end that her mom suggested. "I may not have a full lab or a perfect model. But I have an idea. And I believe it matters." When she uploaded the file, her hands were shaking. Her mom put a hand on her shoulder. "No matter what happens next, I'm proud of you." Emma smiled, though nerves danced behind her eyes. "I just hope they see what I see." She didn't know it yet, but someone would see. Not just see, but be stunned. And in exactly 9 days, a man known for sending rockets into space, digging tunnels under cities, and dreaming about Mars, would come face to face with a 5th-grade girl who would make him question everything. Because Emma wasn't just participating in a competition. She was about to change the game entirely. The days leading up to the final round of the Rising Stars Challenge were a strange blend of adrenaline, anticipation, and quiet terror. Emma had submitted her project, her feather drive model, her simulation footage, and a video pitch that included a whiteboard, a laser pointer, and about 14 outtakes she hoped no one would ever see. Now, it was a waiting game. Except, no one was really waiting. Everyone was talking. Her classmates began treating her differently. Not all of them were mean, but most of them just didn't know how to act around her anymore. "You're that girl, right?" a 7th grader said in the hallway. "The one who's going to SpaceX." Emma shrugged. "I submitted a project. That's all." Jason, on the other hand, wasn't subtle. At all. "I heard your models held together with duct tape and hope," he smirked one day in science class. Emma didn't flinch. "Still flew better than your drone last year." He flushed but recovered fast. "Let's see how far your feather thing gets you." "My team used real-time AI correction and onboard LiDAR mapping. We built a functioning Mars drone in 2 weeks." Ben leaned toward her and whispered, "If that drone's ego-powered, it won't get far." Emma stifled a laugh. Still, she couldn't shake the nerves. What if Jason was right? What if her project wasn't enough? Then, 5 days before the finalist announcement, it happened. She was home, hunched over her laptop rewatching her own pitch video for the 50th time, cringing at the way her voice cracked in the 3rd sentence, when she got the email. Subject, Rising Stars finalist notification, congratulations. Emma stared at the screen, blinking. Then blinking again. Her brain refused to register the words. "Mom," she called out. "Mom." Rachel ran in, wiping grease off her hands with a rag. "What's wrong?" Emma just turned the screen toward her. Rachel read the email silently, her eyes widening. Then she looked at her daughter and broke into a huge grin. "Emma. You did it." Emma didn't say anything. She just let out a breath she didn't even know she was holding. The finalists, only 10 from across the entire country, were invited to present live, virtually, to the judges. The judges. That included Elon Musk. The news traveled fast. Emma's school posted about it on their website. Local reporters reached out. Her mom even got a voicemail from a tech blogger asking for an exclusive with the mini Musk Buster. Jason? He didn't say much. Just stared at her a little too long in the hallway and walked away with a tight jaw. The day of the live presentations arrived like a rocket launch, too fast, a little terrifying, and impossible to stop. Emma sat in her room, her laptop on a stack of books to get the perfect camera angle. Behind her was a clean whiteboard, some of her sketches pinned up, and a carefully positioned model of the feather drive she'd printed last night, now fully painted silver and navy blue. She wore her favorite hoodie, the one with a small embroidered rocket ship on the sleeve, and her mom's old NASA cap turned backward. It made her feel brave. Ben had texted an hour before. "You got this." "They aren't ready." The Zoom room filled up. Other finalists were teens, some older, some in high school, most with professional backgrounds, complicated terms, and slides that looked like college dissertations. Emma swallowed hard. Then Elon Musk appeared. Just like that. No dramatic entrance. No fireworks. Just him, sitting in a black hoodie, sipping coffee from a SpaceX mug, nodding as the moderator greeted everyone. Her palms were sweating. Her heart was pounding. Her throat felt like cotton. She was up third. The first 2 finalists were impressive. One built a sustainable air filter for lunar habitats. Another presented an AI assistant for deep space communication delay. Smart. Polished. Like they'd already been on TED Talks. Then her name appeared on the screen. Emma Parker, Feather Drive, a hybrid propulsion concept for deep space travel. She took a deep breath. Then another. Then clicked share screen and began. "Hi. My name is Emma Parker, and I'm 10 years old. I know I'm probably the youngest here today, but I've been dreaming about space since I could speak. This is my project, the Feather Drive." She kept her voice steady. She explained how traditional propulsion systems either burn too much fuel or move too slowly for true deep space missions. She introduced her hybrid idea, electromagnetic rail boosting, followed by ion propulsion for long-distance efficiency. She showed her scaled-down model and the software simulation that demonstrated how it worked. Then came her closing line. "I know I'm not a scientist yet. But I believe that ideas, when they're right, don't have an age limit." There was silence. And then, "Elon, you're muted," said one of the judges. The whole panel chuckled. Elon Musk unmuted. "Right. Sorry. That was, wow." Emma stared at the screen, frozen. He leaned closer to the camera. "Emma, that was seriously impressive. You're thinking like an engineer, a physicist, and a visionary, all at once. And I love the name. Feather Drive. That's poetic." Emma blinked. "Thank you, Mr. Musk." He smiled. "Call me Elon." After the call ended, her mom ran into the room and wrapped her in a bear hug. "You were amazing," she whispered. Emma finally let herself breathe. Maybe she hadn't won yet. But something had shifted. She knew it. The look in Musk's eyes, the nods from the panel, the quiet respect from a virtual room full of brilliance, she wasn't just some kid anymore. She was a contender. And this competition? It had only just begun. Emma barely slept the night after the finalist presentation. Her brain wouldn't shut off. It replayed every second, Elon's reaction, the panel's quiet awe, and the surreal moment her face was on screen next to people almost twice her age. By sunrise, she was wired. Not tired. Just, full. Full of excitement, nerves, hope, and that creeping fear that maybe this dream was still too big to reach. Because now that the world was paying attention, the stakes felt real. And then, the email arrived. Subject, Rising Stars Final Round, Prototype Demonstration Update Required. Emma's heart stopped for a second. Finalists are now required to submit a live demonstration video of their prototype in action, showing proof of concept performance under defined simulation conditions. Deadline, 72 hours. Her stomach dropped. Her current model, her feather drive prototype, wasn't ready for that. It worked in parts. The electromagnetic rail pulse still had instability. The ion booster simulation was digital only. She hadn't actually made the two components talk to each other yet. This is bad, she muttered, scrolling the email again. Rachel walked in, yawning, holding 2 mugs of hot cocoa. They upped the pressure again. Emma just held out the laptop. Her mom read it and cursed under her breath. They can't give you just 3 days. It's part of the challenge, Emma cut in. They want to see who can handle last-minute testing. Who can adapt. Rachel nodded slowly. Well. That's a dirty trick, but kind of genius. Emma didn't smile. By noon, the garage had transformed into a war zone. Emma had spread out every wire, capacitor, and 3D printed part she had. Ben arrived 10 minutes later, out of breath, holding a Tupperware full of cold pancakes. Emergency fuel, he said, handing them over. Emma snorted. I'm gonna need more than carbs. Together, they tackled the problem. The rail pulse had one major flaw, it overheated after 3 seconds. Emma tried rerouting the current, but that made the launcher too weak. Her capacitor array shorted out twice. A mini fire sparked near the base of the thruster. Her mom had to stomp it out with a sneaker and a bottle of Gatorade. Nothing was working. By the end of the night, Emma slumped onto the floor, legs out, eyes glassy. This isn't going to work, she said quietly. Ben sat down beside her. It will. You just need a new angle. I don't have a new angle. The math says it works. The sim says it works. But in real life, I can't make the pulse and ion drive connect. And I can't fake it in the video, they'll know. She dropped her head into her hands. I'm going to blow this. Rachel, who had been quietly working on one of the broken power cells across the room, looked up. You're not blowing anything. You're building something no kid has ever built. Heck, no adult I know has built this. But if it doesn't work, then you figure out why. And if you can't do that in time, you show them how you'll fix it. That's what real engineers do. They don't pretend. They adapt. Emma looked up slowly. Show them what's broken. Rachel shrugged. Make the problem part of the pitch. Be honest. Be brilliant. Ben snapped his fingers. Dude. That's it. Emma narrowed her eyes. What is? Reverse the video pitch structure. Instead of starting with the perfect demo, start with the failure. Then walk them through the fix in real time. Make it a story. Emma's eyes widened. A story. She was already on her feet. By the next day, the garage was buzzing again. Emma changed course. She stopped trying to fake a flawless demo and started filming what was real, the struggle, the mess, the breakthrough. She recorded herself walking through the challenge. This is my hybrid propulsion model. The rail launcher delivers the initial kinetic energy, and the ion engine handles deep space thrust. But here's the truth, they don't sync yet. Why? I've been testing capacitor switching speeds and she ran tests while narrating. One model flared. Another sputtered. One finally gave a clean pulse. That's it. That's the key. I've adjusted the ignition delay to 0.7 seconds post-rail firing. That seems to stabilize the handoff. Then she showed her simulation overlay, comparing old data and new. This is a work in progress. But that's how every mission starts. From challenge to correction to clarity. At the end of the video, she looked directly into the camera. You asked for innovation. This is mine. Imperfect. In progress. And absolutely possible. She uploaded the file with 5 minutes to spare. Then she collapsed onto the garage floor, face up, and stared at the ceiling like it held all the answers. Rachel passed her a soda. So, how do you feel? Emma took a long sip. Exhausted. Terrified. Weirdly hopeful. Ben grinned. That's how you know it's good. What Emma didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that 24 hours later, her video would reach someone unexpected. Someone who'd just gotten out of a long meeting at SpaceX. Someone who clicked play on a 10-year-old submission expecting nothing, and ended up watching the full thing, twice. And then, he sent an internal email with just 4 words. Get me this kid. Monday morning started off like any other. Emma was sitting at the kitchen table, wearing her hoodie backward by accident, trying to figure out if she was too nervous to eat the toast her mom had just made. The competition results weren't due for another day or two, but her stomach was already flipping like she was on a roller coaster. Eat something, Rachel said, handing her a banana. You look like a gremlin. Emma mumbled, gremlins don't eat bananas, but took a bite anyway. She was halfway through scrolling a post on a science forum about a new solar sail deployment when her mom's phone started ringing. Rachel glanced at the screen, then blinked. That's weird. What? Emma asked, mouth full. Her mom squinted. It says, unknown, Hawthorne, California. That's where SpaceX is headquartered. Emma froze. No way. Rachel hesitated, then picked up. Hello. She listened for a moment. Her eyebrows shot up. Wait. Seriously? This isn't a prank, is it? Emma leaned over the table, staring, whispering, is it Elon? Rachel didn't answer. She just stood slowly, mouth open. Then she handed the phone to Emma. It's for you. Emma blinked. Me? She grabbed the phone, her hands instantly sweaty. Hello. A calm, polite voice responded, Hi Emma, this is Sarah Levine, I'm calling on behalf of Mr. Elon Musk. He just watched your Rising Stars submission and was very impressed. He's requested a private video call with you today, if you're available. Emma's brain stopped working. You mean? Elon Musk wants to talk to me? Like, for real? Not a recording? Yes, Sarah said, chuckling. For real. Could you be available at 3 p.m. Pacific time? We'll send a secure link. Emma looked at the clock. That was in 4 hours. Why yeah. Totally. I'll be ready, she blurted. The voice on the line smiled through the phone. Perfect. We're looking forward to it. Click. Emma stared at the phone. Then looked up at her mom. And screamed. The next few hours were chaos. Rachel cleaned the garage. Ben biked over in 10 minutes flat, holding a ring light and a pack of gum. You can't meet Elon with bad lighting or bad breath, he said. Emma paced, changed outfits 4 times, and ended up back in her rocket hoodie. I don't want to look like I'm trying too hard. At 2:59 p.m., she clicked the link. At 3:01, Elon Musk appeared on the screen. He looked casual, wearing a black t-shirt with the word "Occupy Mars" on it. His background was a simple office. No fanfare. "Hey, Emma," he said with a small smile. "Thanks for making time to chat." Emma swallowed hard. Thanks for watching my video." I didn't think." "You're brilliant," he interrupted. "I've watched hundreds of these rising stars' pitches. Yours wasn't just smart, it was scrappy. And real. You problem-solved in real time. That's the mark of someone who's going to do big things." Emma blinked. "Thank you. I didn't think it was good enough." Elon leaned back. "Here's a secret. Nothing is ever perfect the first time. If it is, it means you didn't push hard enough." Emma nodded slowly. "That's kind of what my mom says. She fixes engines." He grinned. "Then she's a smart lady." There was a pause. Then he leaned forward, just slightly. "Here's the deal. I want to invite you to tour the SpaceX campus. In person. Bring your prototype. Meet the engineers. I want them to hear your pitch, see your brain at work. And I want to help you build a better version." Emma's jaw dropped. "Wait. Me? You want me to come to SpaceX?" "If you're willing," he said. "We'll cover travel. And I'll personally sit in on your presentation." Her heart felt like it might actually explode. "Yes. Absolutely yes." "Good," Elon said. "Because I think you've got something. Not just an idea. But vision. And that's rare." He glanced at his watch. "I've got to jump to a Mars colony call, but you'll hear from my team soon. See you in Hawthorne, Emma." The screen went black. Emma stared at her reflection for a second. Then she burst into tears. That night, she didn't sleep. Not because she was scared, but because her mind was alive. She stayed up sketching a better ion chamber. Recalculating capacitor efficiency. Mapping out exactly how she'd present it to Elon Musk. In person. Her world had changed in one phone call. And what came next would change everything. Emma had been to California once, sort of. A layover at LAX when she was 6. She remembered sleeping on her mom's lap in the terminal and vaguely seeing palm trees through the windows. But this trip? This wasn't a layover. This was a launch pad. By the next morning, Emma had a flight booked. 2 round-trip tickets. One for her, one for Rachel. Courtesy of SpaceX. When the itinerary landed in her inbox, Emma just stared at it. Passenger name, Emma Parker. Departure, Thursday, 7:05 a.m., BWI to LAX. Destination, SpaceX HQ, Hawthorne, California. She read it 10 times before yelling, "Ben! Call me right now." The next few days moved in fast forward. Emma and her mom rushed to get ready. Ben helped 3D print some final model parts for her prototype. They cut thin acrylic sheets to create a sleeker launch rail, then rebuilt the base from carbon fiber leftovers Rachel had stashed in the garage. The entire thing now fit inside a heavy-duty plastic case that Emma insisted on carrying as a personal item. "No way I'm trusting this to TSA," she said. Rachel packed tools, just in case, including a soldering iron and a multimeter. Emma rolled her eyes, but secretly loved that her mom was going full NASA dad mode. "You never know," Rachel said, stuffing spare batteries into a sock. "Murphy's Law always shows up on demo days." At the airport, Emma was quiet. Not nervous. Just processing. She sat by the window, watching the tarmac buzz with fuel trucks and luggage carts, wondering how many of those workers ever imagined putting something in space. Wondering if she would. Rachel nudged her. "You okay?" Emma nodded. "Yeah. I'm just thinking, everything's going to be different after this, isn't it? Her mom smiled softly. It already is. They landed in LA to a dry heat and endless sunlight. Emma blinked through the brightness, her hoodie sleeves shoved up, her prototype clutched in both hands like it was made of gold. A sleek black Tesla was waiting for them at the curb. The driver, a young woman with a lanyard that said SpaceX Visitor Services, grinned when she saw Emma. You must be the rocket kid. Emma blushed. That's me, I guess. I'm Natalie. You ready to see where dreams get launched? Emma nodded so fast she nearly dropped her case. SpaceX HQ wasn't like she imagined. It was cooler. Not some futuristic glass tower, but a giant steel building with sharp lines and rocket parts scattered casually around like playground equipment. One of the original Falcon 9 boosters stood right there in the front courtyard, so tall it made Emma dizzy looking up. Inside, it smelled like metal and ozone. Engineers walked past in hoodies and safety goggles, some holding coffee, some holding tools. Giant digital screens showed live feeds from Cape Canaveral, test schedules, and spacecraft telemetry. Every hallway buzzed with focus. Natalie gave them a tour. They walked past the mission control room, the prototype bay, even the Dragon capsule lab. Emma could barely contain herself. Do you know how insane this is? She whispered to Rachel. I've watched videos of this place for years. And now I'm in it. Rachel smiled. Feels right. Finally, Natalie brought them into a mid-sized conference room. It was sleek but simple, long table, wall screen, a glass board covered in equations. Okay, she said. This is where the presentation will happen. You'll have a few minutes to set up, and Elon should be in shortly. Emma looked around. Her heart was pounding, but her hands were steady. I'm ready, she said quietly. Rachel gave her shoulder a squeeze. No matter what happens, I'm proud of you. Emma nodded, then carefully opened her case and began assembling her prototype. At 3:01 p.m., the door opened. Elon walked in. This time, there was no screen. No Zoom call. Just him. In person. Taller than she expected. Calm. Focused. Hey, Emma, he said with a nod. Emma swallowed. Hi. Thanks for having me. Thanks for being here, he said, taking a seat. Two other engineers joined him, one with a tablet already recording notes. No pressure, Elon added, but I've seen 1,000 pitches this year. Yours stood out. Show us what you've got. Emma stood. Her legs were trembling, but she'd rehearsed. She knew this. She introduced the Feather Drive 2.0. She walked them through the launch rail upgrade, the new delay trigger system, the custom simulated ion array. Then, she activated the demo. The model clicked into place. Her fingers hovered over the switch. And then, a burst of sound. The mini-pod shot cleanly down the rail and stopped on the cushion at the end. No sparks. No fire. Just smooth motion. Emma exhaled hard. She turned to the room. With scalable optimization, this hybrid could reduce launch fuel by up to 23% and increase range efficiency by nearly 40%. It's still early, but it's possible. Elon leaned back, nodding slowly. One engineer whispered, "Whoa," to himself. Finally, Elon looked at her and said, "You've got more than an idea. You've got traction. And that's rare, even for adults." He stood, walked around the table, and extended a hand. "You ever think about interning here?" Emma's jaw dropped. "I'm 10. He laughed. "Then we'll have to get creative. Let's figure something out." By the time they left SpaceX, Emma's brain was a tornado of disbelief and excitement. Rachel just looked over and said, "Guess you'll need a new science fair project next year." Emma grinned, watching the California sky turn pink above the Falcon 9 booster. Yeah, she said. And maybe a rocket company of my own. Emma's flight home felt like stepping back into reality, except now, reality had changed. By the time the wheels touched down in Maryland, her inbox had exploded. She had emails from science blogs, STEM influencers, and even a high school robotics team in Michigan asking to interview her. Her Instagram, which had previously been 90% rocket doodles and close-ups of her cat beanbag, had nearly 10,000 followers. Someone had screenshotted her presentation and posted it with the caption, "The 10-year-old who just pitched Elon Musk, and didn't flinch." But that wasn't the weirdest part. The weirdest part was the headlines. And they were everywhere. TechCrunch, the future of space may belong to a 10-year-old girl from Maryland. The Verge, meet Emma Parker, the kid who got Elon Musk's attention. Daily Mail, Mini Musk. Genius child wows SpaceX with DIY rocket prototype. BuzzFeed, this 10-year-old space invention has the internet screaming, adopt her, Elon. Emma stared at the screen like it had grown legs. What is happening? Ben FaceTimed her 5 minutes later, grinning like a maniac. You're a meme. Did you see the TikTok edit with the Avengers music behind your demo? You're trending. Emma blinked. Trending like, good trending or weird trending? Both, he said proudly. You made Reddit and Pinterest. But with the fame came the noise. At first, it was cool, people cheering her on, teachers from other states sharing her presentation in class, even a few engineers tagging her with respectful feedback. But then, it shifted. It always does. One Twitter thread claimed she didn't really design the project herself. That it was, probably her dad's idea. Another guy said the whole thing was, clearly staged by SpaceX PR to sell Falcon shares. A few trolls even dug up old photos of her at science camp and mocked her hoodie. Kid gets one prototype to work and suddenly she's the next Einstein. Looks fake to me. No way a 10-year-old knows how to calculate thrust ratios. Emma tried to ignore it. She really did. But words have weight. And even when they come from strangers hiding behind screen names, they still land like punches. Rachel noticed the change first. Something's bothering you, she said over dinner. Emma shrugged. It's nothing. Just, dumb internet people. Rachel raised an eyebrow. The kind who can't build anything, so they try to tear other people down. Emma didn't answer right away. I just didn't think it would feel like this. I thought people would be excited. But some are just, mean. Rachel pushed her plate away, leaned forward. Listen to me. Smart girls scare insecure people. Especially when they're young and loud and right. You're going to threaten some egos, Emma. That's part of being first. Emma looked up slowly. I don't want to be first. I just want to build stuff. Rachel smiled. Then keep building. Let them bark. But even with her mom's pep talk, the negativity still gnawed at her. It got worse when a well-known tech YouTuber uploaded a 12-minute video titled, Why Elon Musk is Wasting His Time on a 10-Year-Old Inventor. It racked up 1.2 million views in 2 days. Emma didn't even watch it. She just saw the thumbnail, her face, zoomed in, with a red arrow pointing to her prototype and a big yellow, fail. She slammed her laptop shut. Ben called her again that night. Hey. Want me to start a flame war in the comments? I got time. Emma gave him a tired smile. Nah. It's not worth it. Ben paused. You know what I think? What? I think you're getting too close to something big. That's why they're freaking out. Emma raised an eyebrow. You think? Duh. Elon doesn't offer private tours to just anyone. And I saw the way he looked when you pitched. He's invested, Em. That means they're going to come for you. She nodded slowly. Then paused. Maybe I am getting close to something big. Her mind started turning again, faster now. What if the feather drive wasn't the end? What if it's just the beginning? Ben grinned. There she is. Later that week, Emma got an email from a senior engineer at SpaceX. Subject: your prototype, let's take it further. They wanted to invite her back, to co-develop the next version in a mentorship program that didn't even exist until Elon insisted they create one. Emma stared at the screen for a long time. This wasn't just a school project anymore. It was the start of a movement. She texted Ben. Guess I better start sketching Feather Drive 3.0. His reply came back instantly. Let's go. But while the world debated whether she was a prodigy or a publicity stunt, Emma was already 10 steps ahead. She had ideas that hadn't even hit paper yet. A new simulation she'd been dying to test. A theory that could change long-distance propulsion forever. They could talk all they wanted. Because Emma? She was just getting started. By the time Emma returned to SpaceX a month later, everything felt different. The first trip was like a dream, a whirlwind. This time, it was business. She wasn't just a visitor now. She had her own temporary badge. Her name was on the door of a small lab space, Feather Lab, Development Bay 3, and her desk was right across from Kira Santiago, a 26-year-old propulsion engineer who'd once worked on the Raptor engine. And Kira did not look thrilled about it. The first day, she gave Emma a short nod. So you're the wonder kid, she said flatly. Heard a lot about you. Emma smiled, trying to keep it cool. Thanks. I've read your paper on variable impulse regulation. It's kinda what inspired my dual thrust model. Kira didn't smile back. Cool. Hope you're not here to play engineer. Emma blinked. I'm here to build, she said quietly. Kira turned back to her screen without replying. From that moment, the vibe was off. Emma tried to brush it off. Maybe Kira was just intense. Or tired. Or both. But over the next few days, it became clear, Kira didn't think she belonged. Whenever Emma suggested something, testing a new array angle, tweaking the plasma curve, Kira would question it twice as hard as she did anyone else. You sure that's not just from the sim? You double-check your math. You're missing drift loss. Maybe you should let someone with real launch data take over that part. It wasn't just Kira, either. A few others in the lab started keeping their distance. Like they didn't know how to act around a literal kid on the team. One guy even asked Emma if she needed help carrying her backpack. She laughed it off. But inside, it stung. That night, Emma stayed late at the lab, everyone else gone. The hum of machines was the only sound, and the glow of her data display reflected off the aluminum walls. She stared at her latest test results. Something was off, Kira wasn't wrong about the drift loss. But that wasn't what bugged her. What bugged her was that no one seemed interested in solving it with her. They just wanted her to be wrong. She ran the simulation again, adjusting the impulse delay and compensating with microcurrent magnetics. The test returned better numbers. Not perfect, but close. Emma leaned back, rubbing her eyes. Why does it feel like I'm being tested harder now that I'm actually here, she mumbled. Behind her, someone spoke. Because you are. Emma jumped. It was Elon. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. Didn't mean to scare you, he said. Emma blinked. What are you doing here? It's almost midnight. I don't sleep much, he said. And I like to check in on my wild bets. Emma gave him a half smile. And am I still one of those? He tilted his head. Definitely. But wild bets pay off when they're backed by obsession. You still obsessed? Emma nodded slowly. Even when it sucks. Good, he said. That's how you know it's real. He walked over to her screen, scanning the data. She's pushing back, he asked. Emma didn't need to ask who. Kira thinks I'm too young to be here, she admitted. That I skipped the line. She's not completely wrong, Elon said calmly. You did skip the line. Emma looked up, surprised. But lines are designed for systems. You're not a system. You're an exception. He paused. And exceptions make people nervous. Especially people who had to crawl their way in the hard way. Emma folded her arms. So what do I do? Elon gave her a long look. You build something undeniable. The next morning, Emma showed up with fire in her chest. She printed a hard copy of her revised thrust analysis, slapped it on the team table, and said, I solved the drift issue. It was the booster curve overlap. Here's the math. Kira looked up, skeptically. You got all this from a sim? Nope, Emma said, sliding over a USB. Ran it on the vacuum rig last night. Got a 14% increase in stability. Kira scanned the printout. Her expression didn't change, but she stopped talking. Someone else on the team said, wait, this is actually solid. Did you run the handoff timing too? Yup, Emma said. And I think we can improve it even more if we try the dual-phase power cycle you mentioned last week. Kira looked at her for a long second. And finally, she nodded. Okay, Parker. Let's test that. It didn't fix everything overnight. There were still stares. Still whispers. Still people who thought she didn't belong. But Emma didn't care anymore. Because she wasn't just the kid who wowed Elon. She was the one solving problems. And that? That was louder than any headline. The lab felt like a pressure cooker that afternoon. Emma's latest idea had worked, but it wasn't perfect. It wasn't even close. The Feather Drive 3.0 had gone from simulation to prototype. The results had been promising enough to get the team's attention, but when it came time for the real-world test, they all knew, the stakes were high. Alright, Kira said, clicking through the final parameters on the monitor. This is either going to launch us into a new frontier, or we're going to have to start from scratch. Emma stood in front of the test rig, the cold steel walls surrounding her. She could feel the weight of the team's eyes on her. The tension was palpable, but her pulse didn't quicken. This was what she had been training for. A few feet away, Elon was watching the scene unfold. His hands were shoved into the pockets of his SpaceX jacket, his gaze steady. He seemed more relaxed than anyone else in the room. Not that Emma was looking for validation from him. No, what she needed was results. Proof that the work she put into this had been worth it. Kira hit the button to engage the first phase of the test. The hum of machinery filled the room as the rig powered on. The blueprints, the calculations, the countless hours of late nights spent refining the drive, they were all about to come to life. Emma held her breath, watching the data unfold. Nothing happened. For a second, the silence in the room felt like an eternity. Emma's heart thudded. Then, without warning, a burst of power surged through the system, far more than anyone had expected. The room buzzed with static, and lights flickered. But what shocked everyone the most was the sudden increase in energy output from the prototype. The Feather Drive had gone from experimental to borderline unstable. Shut it down. Kira shouted, but it was too late. Emma dove toward the control panel, frantically pushing buttons, trying to stabilize the system. But no matter how hard she pressed, the feedback loop was growing out of control. Emma! Kira yelled. Get clear. But Emma didn't move. In that moment, everything clicked. The equations she had spent sleepless nights on, the calculations she thought were accurate, they didn't just work, they were now pushing beyond the limits of the prototype's design. This was it, the breakthrough. But in all her excitement, she hadn't anticipated the side effects. She wasn't just testing propulsion anymore. She was testing the very limits of what a low-cost, sustainable propulsion system could handle. Come on, Emma muttered, watching the feedback increase dangerously. Then, in an instant, a massive surge of energy pulsed through the lab. The prototype sputtered and sparked as the power grid began to shut itself down. Then, boom! The machine powered off. Everything went black. For a split second, no one spoke. Then, chaos. Kira rushed to the control console. "What did you do?" she snapped, her voice tight with panic. The other engineers scattered to assess the damage, but they all knew one thing for sure: the test had failed. Emma stood frozen in place, her mind racing through the calculations, the possibilities, the results. It had worked in theory, but the system had overloaded. She had pushed it too far. "You didn't prepare for the thermodynamic spike," Kira added sharply, her eyes narrowing at Emma. "You're not even old enough to understand the risks of something like this." Emma swallowed. "I thought the backup phase would compensate for that. I didn't account for the stress on the secondary coil." Kira shook her head. "You don't guess with this kind of tech, Parker. You test it over and over. You simulate it thousands of times before you risk putting it into an environment like this." Emma bit her lip, trying to push down the rising frustration. Kira was right, but Emma had pushed past the point of simple simulations. She had thought she could make it work. "I'll fix it," Emma said, finally speaking. "I can fix it. I just need time." Kira glanced at Elon, who had been silently watching from the corner. There was a flicker of something in his eyes, something Emma couldn't quite place. "Can you?" Kira asked, her tone softer now, but no less demanding. Elon finally spoke up. "Emma's right. She can fix it." Everyone in the room turned to him, surprised by his sudden intervention. "What?" Kira said, clearly taken aback. "Elon, this is..." He raised a hand. "It's a prototype. That's what prototypes do. They break. We learn. We move forward." Emma's heart leapt. He was giving her a shot. "And she's got the chops to pull this off," Elon continued. "You haven't seen the math like I have. She'll fix it, and it'll be better than before." Emma met Kira's gaze. Kira's expression softened just a little, but she said nothing. It wasn't over yet. The rest of the team dispersed to start the repairs. But Emma? She was already back at her desk, going over the failure in her mind. She took out her notebook and started to recalibrate the calculations, again, and again, and again. She wasn't going to make the same mistake twice. Kira stayed behind as well, watching her work. "You're not scared?" Kira asked after a long silence. "No," Emma said, never looking up. "This is what it takes." There was a pause. Then Kira spoke again, her voice quieter this time. "You remind me of myself when I was your age. I made a lot of mistakes too, thinking I could just will things into existence. But in this line of work, that doesn't fly. You're gonna fail 100 times. And those 100 times, they count." Emma glanced up at Kira, who had a faint smile now. "I get that. And I'm gonna fix it. I'm not stopping until it works." Kira nodded. Over the next few days, Emma and Kira worked late into the night, hand in hand through the revisions. The repairs and adjustments weren't easy, but Emma could feel herself getting closer. With each test, the prototype came a little closer to perfection. And then came the day of the final test. The feather drive hummed to life again. This time, it stayed steady. No feedback loops. No surges. Just smooth, consistent power. The team was silent as the data continued to roll in. Then, Elon spoke, breaking the tension. "Emma," he said, with a slight nod of approval. "You did it." Emma's heart soared. It worked. She had done it. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The final test wasn't just another simulation. It wasn't just another calculation. It was the launch. The real thing. The feather drive prototype was set for its maiden voyage. This wasn't a drill. This wasn't a controlled test. The stakes couldn't have been higher. Emma's hands were trembling slightly as she walked into the massive hangar where the prototype was housed. The rumble of rockets being prepared, the whir of machines at work, it felt surreal. But there was something about the sound of this place, something that almost felt like destiny calling her name. She stood in front of the sleek, white rocket that had been outfitted with her drive. The body of the machine gleamed under the industrial lights, its fins sharp and purposeful. She ran a hand over the surface, feeling the cool metal under her fingertips. Kira had been the one to oversee the final prep work on the prototype, but it was Emma's designs that had carried it this far. She was the one who had made the impossible real. And now, she was standing on the precipice of history. Ready to make history? Elon's voice cut through the quiet. Emma turned around. Elon was standing with his hands in his pockets, his eyes glinting with that familiar mix of excitement and calm that only he seemed to exude. His ever-present air of confidence was contagious, and for the first time in days, Emma felt the knot in her stomach loosen. "I think so," she said, forcing a smile. "I mean, I've done the math. We've triple-checked everything. That's the thing about math. It's always right until it isn't." Elon's tone was light, but there was a flicker of seriousness in his eyes. "That's why I love this. You can't control everything, but you still try." Emma nodded, her eyes scanning the rocket one last time. There was no going back now. If the feather drive worked, and if the tests all showed that this technology was viable, SpaceX would have taken a massive leap forward in the space race. More than just efficiency, this would make space travel cheaper and more sustainable, something that could change the way humanity thought about exploring the stars. Kira approached from behind. Her face was hard to read, but she gave Emma a nod of approval. "You ready?" Emma exhaled sharply, trying to steady her nerves. "Let's do this." 10 minutes to launch, came the announcement over the intercom. Emma moved to the control station, where a team of engineers sat at their terminals, monitoring every aspect of the countdown. Each number that flashed on the screen felt like a countdown to her future. "Systems are green," one of the engineers said. "All systems are operational." "Feather drive tests look stable," another called out. Emma's hands hovered over the control console. Everything seemed to be in place. But there was still that sliver of uncertainty. There always was, right before a big moment. The unknown. She looked at Elon one last time. "Do you ever get nervous?" she asked, more to herself than him. Elon gave a small smile. "I don't. I used to, though. It was a long time ago. But the thing is, every launch is a learning opportunity. Every failure is a stepping stone. The trick is to be okay with it." Emma nodded, her stomach still fluttering. It was a lot to take in, but she knew that this was what she had worked for. The culmination of her life's work, her passion. This was her shot. The intercom crackled again. "All personnel clear the launch pad. Countdown to T0 begins in 5 minutes. Emma closed her eyes for a second, her fingers tracing the edges of the console. This was the moment. There would be no turning back. Kira walked over, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You did good, kid. Now, go do your thing." Emma looked up at her, her eyes meeting Kira's. "Thanks," she whispered. Kira's approval meant more than she had expected. She wasn't the only one who thought Emma might have a shot at this. The world seemed to shrink around her as she took her place at the final control station. The weight of the moment bore down on her. Her heart raced. Every single moment in this process, every test, every failure, every moment of doubt, had led her here. The only thing left now was to launch. Elon, Kira, and the rest of the team stood behind her, watching, waiting. The lights overhead flickered as the final countdown began, and Emma could feel the electricity of the moment buzzing in the air. 30 seconds. Her fingers hovered over the controls. All the preparation, all the sleepless nights, everything had come to this one precise moment. She took a breath, then pressed the button. The sound of engines roaring to life filled the air as the rocket surged upward, leaving a trail of smoke and flame behind it. The feather drive was alive. Emma's eyes widened as she watched the rocket climb higher and higher, her heart swelling with pride and awe. It wasn't just a launch. It was the beginning of something incredible. The numbers on the screen ticked off, showing the rocket's velocity and altitude climbing at a steady pace. Emma's mind raced through the calculations, double-checking every result. Everything was on track. Then, the impossible happened. The rocket was a third of the way to space when an unexpected anomaly appeared on the control board. The feather drive system was registering a sudden surge in energy, more than anyone had predicted. "Emma!" Kira shouted. "Look at the readings." Emma's breath caught in her throat. The feather drive was way overperforming. The energy output was higher than anticipated, faster than it should have been, but the rocket was still stabilizing. Elon's voice came over the intercom. "Don't panic. We've seen this before. Let it stabilize." But this was different. Emma knew this wasn't normal. The surge was far beyond anything they'd encountered in testing. "We need to shut it down," one of the engineers yelled. But it was too late. The rocket was already pushing beyond its expected performance parameters. Emma clenched her fists. The feather drive wasn't just performing, it was defying the rules. And the higher it went, the more Emma realized, they were on the edge of something huge. The rocket surged through the sky, its engines roaring with a power that felt almost too much to contain. Emma stared at the data streaming across the monitor, each readout a testament to how far beyond expectations the feather drive had gone. The rocket was tearing through the atmosphere at an alarming rate, climbing faster than anyone had predicted. But there was one problem. It wasn't just the speed, no, that wasn't the issue. The real problem was the surge in energy. The feather drive was pushing the rocket too fast, too high, and Emma knew that it could only handle this kind of power for so long. "Emma!" Kira's voice cut through the static on the intercom. "Look at the stabilizer readings. You need to adjust the output before we lose control." Emma's heart raced, and for a brief moment, her mind went blank. She'd tested the system. She'd done everything she could to predict this kind of outcome, but no one had expected the feather drive to exceed its design specs in such an extreme way. "This wasn't supposed to happen," Emma muttered to herself. "It wasn't supposed to be this much." Kira's voice crackled again. "Focus, Emma. We need you to stabilize this thing. You're the one who built it. You're the only one who can fix it." Emma's hands were shaking as she punched in the override code. Her mind was firing on all cylinders as she processed what needed to be done, trying to correct the input in real time. She could feel the tension building. The rocket was heading towards the edge of the stratosphere, where the atmosphere grew thinner, and its engines were running hotter than they had ever been designed for. The feather drive had already broken through the expected limits. The system was pushing a quantum leap in propulsion technology, but the cost was becoming evident. The more Emma tried to stabilize it, the more volatile the power readings became. Her eyes darted from one screen to the next, watching the engine's core temperature spike. "We're gonna burn up if this keeps going," one of the engineers called out from the control room. The feedback loop was becoming too much. The energy levels were unsustainable. The feather drive, if left unchecked, would overheat, destabilize, and explode. They were on the verge of a catastrophe. Emma felt like she was drowning in a sea of numbers. But then, a thought broke through the chaos. There was one last-ditch effort, one emergency procedure that could reset the system, but it was risky. Extremely risky. She would have to redirect the surplus energy into a series of temporary capacitors that would, if they held, redistribute the power evenly across the system. It could work. But there was one thing she didn't know: would it be enough? Without hesitation, Emma input the emergency protocol. She knew that if it didn't work, the rocket would likely disintegrate before it reached orbit. The only thing she had now was faith in her design. Faith in her own ability to solve the impossible. Her fingers moved over the console, rerouting energy. Come on, come on. The rocket continued to climb, but now, Emma could feel a sudden, violent tug in the controls. The pressure was mounting, and it was getting harder to maintain the data. She couldn't afford to look away, not for a second. Stabilizers are holding, Kira said. There was a note of disbelief in her voice. Wait. Emma, the feedback is starting to reverse. It's stabilizing. Emma's heart pounded in her chest as the energy surge began to dissipate. The capacitors were doing their job, but the rocket was still climbing at breakneck speed. The systems had managed to get under control, but they were still deep in the upper atmosphere. She pressed her ear to the intercom, trying to focus on the rest of the crew. We're clear of the thickest part of the atmosphere, Elon's voice came through, calm as ever. Prepare for orbital velocity in T-5 minutes. This thing's going to make history. Emma couldn't believe what she was hearing. The feather drive had done the impossible, it had taken the rocket to the edge of the stratosphere without disintegrating. Now, the challenge was maintaining control as it broke through the upper atmosphere. But Emma wasn't done yet. The real test was still to come. The rocket hit the transition zone between the atmosphere and the void of space. The engines sputtered for a moment as they pushed against the thinning air. The feather drive, its heart still beating at full power, was navigating this unknown territory. Altitude, 100 kilometers. Velocity, 28,000 kilometers per hour, an engineer reported, reading the telemetry from the rocket. Emma's eyes locked onto the data. The numbers were starting to blur together as her adrenaline surged. She was witnessing the very limits of human engineering. Stabilization is maintaining, Kira said, sounding relieved. Energy output is dropping to safe levels. We're in orbit. We've done it. But Emma knew that the final stretch was never the easiest. They'd reached space, yes, but they still had to ensure that the feather drive didn't cause a catastrophic malfunction once they were fully in orbit. Her fingers were moving rapidly over the console, rerouting energy to stabilize the system. It wasn't enough just to have gotten this far. They had to be sure the technology was capable of maintaining orbit without any further malfunctions. Kira was right beside her, analyzing the system as well. The two of them worked seamlessly, making adjustments in real time. They had never worked so closely together, and it felt like they were the only two people in the world who understood the importance of this moment. Then, the numbers finally slowed down. The rocket stabilized. And for the first time, Emma could breathe. We've done it, Kira whispered, a rare moment of triumph in her voice. Emma turned to her, her heart still pounding. Yeah. We did. But as Emma's hands hovered above the console, her eyes caught something in the corner of the screen. A blip. A flicker of data that hadn't been there before. Her heart skipped a beat. Wait, Emma said, her voice tight with realization. What's that? Kira glanced at the screen. That wasn't there before. On the telemetry, a new signal had appeared. It wasn't a glitch, no, it was a signal that was definitely coming from the feather drive's propulsion system. The data was weak, but it was there. A faint pulse, like a signal from deep space. Elon's voice came through the intercom. What's going on? Emma looked up at Kira. I think, the drive is sending out a signal. The tension in the control room was palpable. Emma's eyes were locked onto the screen, where the strange pulse from the feather drive continued to flicker. It wasn't supposed to be there. There was no logical reason for it. The propulsion system had been designed with cutting-edge technology, but it wasn't supposed to be sending out any kind of signal. Emma, Kira said, her voice urgent but calm. We need to figure out what that is. Now. Elon's voice crackled over the intercom, a trace of concern beneath his usual cool demeanor. What's going on? Is there an issue with the drive? Emma didn't look up. Her fingers flew across the console as she ran diagnostics and tried to isolate the source of the pulse. The data was cryptic, almost like a beacon, but no one had programmed the feather drive to send out any kind of transmission, let alone one that seemed to be coming from deep space. I'm not sure, Emma replied, her voice tight. But it's not a system fault. It looks like a signal. And it's coming from the drive itself. She hit a few more keys, amplifying the signal's frequency. As the numbers appeared on the screen, Emma felt a strange chill creeping up her spine. The frequency was unlike anything she had ever seen before. It wasn't random interference. This wasn't a glitch. The signal was deliberate. It was designed. But who, or what, was sending it? Get Elon on the line, Kira said, her voice sharp. We need answers. A few moments later, Elon appeared on the video feed, his face slightly drawn, though his expression was still as intense as ever. What's happening, Emma? You said the signal was coming from the drive? Emma nodded, her fingers still hovering over the console. Yes, the drive is sending out a signal. But it doesn't make sense. I don't know who or what would have programmed it. We didn't build it for this purpose. Elon's brow furrowed. Could it be some kind of interference? Some kind of unknown force acting on the drive? Emma shook her head. No, it's too structured. This is intentional. It's like it's trying to communicate with something. There was a long pause on the feed as Elon considered this. He leaned forward slightly, eyes narrowing. Communicate with what? Emma didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reran the signal sequence, her mind racing. It didn't make sense. How could the feather drive, something so new, so human, be sending out a signal like this? Who would be listening? And why now? It's not coming from us, she said finally, breaking the silence. It's coming from somewhere else. Kira, who had been standing silently behind Emma, spoke up. Like a message? From space? Emma glanced up at her, heart thumping. That's exactly what it looks like. Elon seemed to process this for a long moment, his lips pressed into a thin line. So you're telling me that our drive, this human-made piece of technology, is somehow reaching out to something beyond us? Emma nodded slowly, her stomach tightening. Yes. And it's not random. This signal, it's too patterned. It's almost like it's waiting for a response. There was another long silence, and then Elon did something unexpected. He smiled. You know, I've always suspected that we weren't alone in the universe, he said, a hint of amusement in his voice. This could be a breakthrough like nothing we've ever seen before. Emma stared at the screen, her mind racing. Elon, you're not getting it. This is too much of a coincidence. The feather drive, my design, shouldn't be doing this. It's not supposed to communicate. It's supposed to be a propulsion system. Kira stepped forward, her voice steady. She's right, Elon. This wasn't part of the plan. We need to be careful. Emma's mind spun with 100 possibilities. What did this mean? Was it a sign of alien life? A mistake in their design? Or was the feather drive acting as a beacon, calling something, or someone, toward them? Emma, Elon said, his voice suddenly serious. What do you think we should do? The question hung in the air. For the first time, Emma realized the weight of the decision before her. They were on the cusp of something that could change the course of human history. If this signal was what she thought it was, if it was really a message from an extraterrestrial source, then they were standing on the edge of an entirely new chapter for humanity. But at the same time, there were risks. What if the message was a trap? What if they were opening a door to something they couldn't control? The unknown was vast, and they were mere specks in the grand scheme of the universe. I don't know, Emma said quietly, her voice trembling slightly. I don't know what to do. Elon's eyes softened for a moment, and he leaned back in his chair. That's okay. No one has all the answers. But we have to make a choice. We either let this signal fade, pretend it's nothing, or we investigate. We could be on the verge of discovering something that could change everything. Emma swallowed hard. The weight of the decision was enormous, but she knew that this wasn't just about her anymore. This wasn't just about the feather drive, or even about SpaceX. This was about humanity's future. We have to find out, she said finally, her voice steady with determination. We can't just ignore this. Elon's eyes gleamed with approval. Agreed. Let's see where this takes us. Just as Emma was about to return to the console to try and trace the signal, something new appeared on the screen. A ripple. A flicker of movement in the data. For a split second, Emma thought it was a glitch, but then the signal appeared to respond. Her breath caught in her throat as the signal pulsed again. Only this time, it was different. It wasn't just a random transmission. It was an exact repetition of the signal they had sent out earlier, almost like it was being echoed back. Emma, that wasn't you, was it? Kira asked, her voice barely a whisper. Emma shook her head, her mind racing. No. This is something else. Something is out there. Elon leaned in closer, his eyes scanning the screen. This is it, he said softly. We're not alone. And they're listening. The control room was filled with a strange kind of quiet. The hum of machinery, the faint clicking of keyboards, the occasional murmur of engineers, all of it seemed to fade into the background as Emma stared at the screen, the echoing signal still vibrating in her mind. The message had returned, repeated. The pattern was unmistakable now. Something was out there, responding to them. The tension was palpable. No one had ever been in a situation like this. A child, Emma, had unknowingly opened the door to something beyond their understanding. And now, they had a choice, to move forward or to shut it all down. Emma, are you seeing this? Kira's voice broke through the silence. She was standing next to Emma, her gaze glued to the flickering data. That signal, it's responding. It's answering us. Emma nodded slowly, the weight of what she was about to say hanging heavily in the air. I know. But I can't tell if it's a warning or an invitation. Elon's voice came through the intercom, low and steady. If this is real, Emma, we're on the brink of something bigger than anything we've ever known. We can't just ignore it. This is the moment humanity has been waiting for. Emma felt a chill run through her. She had always dreamed of something bigger. But this wasn't like her childhood daydreams. This was real. The unknown was reaching back. The consequences of this moment were terrifying. They were dealing with forces that no one could predict. And she, Emma, was at the center of it. Let's track the signal, Emma said, her voice determined. We need to know where it's coming from. The engineers worked in tandem, pulling up maps of the stars and connecting the signals to their advanced telemetry systems. The data was cryptic, but the pattern of the signal was starting to make sense. It wasn't just a pulse from a single point in space. It was like a map, a star chart, of sorts, hidden in the signal itself. Emma's hands hovered over the console as the data streamed in front of her eyes. It's coming from a distant part of the galaxy, she said, reading the coordinates. It's in a region we've never explored before. Almost on the edge of known space. Kira looked at her with wide eyes. Are you saying this could be coming from an alien civilization? Emma swallowed hard. I don't know what it is. But it's not from Earth. Elon's voice cut in again. Then it's time we find out exactly what that signal is. Prepare the satellite array. Let's see if we can direct a response. The room sprang to life as the engineers activated the satellite relay systems. The plan was simple. They would use the powerful communication array to send a carefully crafted message back to the source of the signal, and hopefully, they would get an answer. But as the engineers worked, Emma's mind raced. What kind of message did they send? What could they possibly say to something, or someone, that they didn't understand? The possibilities were endless, but so were the dangers. As the team worked tirelessly to align the satellites, Emma couldn't help but feel a sense of awe and fear. She had come this far, crafted a propulsion system that had changed the world, disrupted everything they thought they knew about space travel. But this was something else. She could feel it deep in her bones. Whatever was out there, it wasn't just curious about them. It was watching. Message is ready, one of the engineers said, his voice tense. We're about to send it. Emma nodded, taking a deep breath. This was it. They were about to open a door they might not be able to close. Send it, she said, her voice steady, though her heart was pounding in her chest. The command was given. The signal was sent, a simple message, crafted carefully to avoid any misinterpretations. It was human, honest, and direct. The words were simple, we are here. Are you? The room fell silent as they waited for a response. Emma could feel the seconds stretching into what felt like an eternity. The monitors flickered, the signal processing as their message moved out into the cosmos, toward whatever, or whoever, was waiting. The minutes ticked by slowly. Every second felt like an hour. The engineers were busy analyzing the data, the satellite network humming quietly in the background, while the rest of the room held its breath. Elon was watching Emma closely. His usually composed face now showed a hint of uncertainty. The magnitude of what was happening seemed to have finally settled in. This could change everything, Kira said, her voice barely above a whisper. What if we're the first ones to make contact? Emma didn't respond right away. She was too focused, her eyes glued to the monitors. The response was coming, it had to come. But there was no guarantee it would be the response they were hoping for. And then, it happened. The screen blinked. The lights in the control room flickered as the signal returned, louder, clearer, more intense than before. It's here, Emma whispered. The room erupted in a flurry of activity. Engineers scrambled to analyze the incoming transmission. Emma's hands shook slightly as she ran through the data. The signal, it wasn't just a simple pulse anymore. It was structured, like a language. Can you decode it? Kira asked, her voice filled with awe. Emma didn't answer right away. She was already working through the data. The patterns were unfamiliar, but she had learned to decode complex systems, both human and machine. Slowly, the fragments began to come together. This isn't just a response, Emma said, her voice trembling with excitement and disbelief. This is a message. It was a strange mix of symbols and frequencies, but Emma's mind was already working faster than she had ever imagined. Each symbol matched something familiar, but warped in ways she couldn't explain. And as the transmission deepened, she began to realize that the symbols weren't just random, they were coordinates. Where is it? Elon asked, his voice urgent. Emma took a deep breath, her finger hovering over the console. She pressed a final key, and the coordinates appeared on the screen. They were close, closer than she had ever imagined. It was a place she never thought possible. The signal had come from the farthest reaches of the universe. But now, it wasn't just out there anymore. It was here. This isn't just a message," Emma said, her voice almost a whisper. "It's an invitation." The room was charged with a mix of awe and fear. The coordinates had appeared on the screen, a precise set of numbers that pointed to a place in the farthest reaches of the universe, an area no human ship had ever reached, not even with the most advanced technology. Emma felt her heart race as she processed the significance of the data. She had always dreamed of discovering something incredible, but this was beyond anything she had ever imagined. "This is it," Kira said quietly, her voice filled with awe. "This is the invitation." Elon, who had been silently observing the screen, leaned forward. "Emma, can we trust this? Do we really know what we're dealing with here?" Emma didn't answer immediately. Her mind was spinning with possibilities. An invitation from somewhere, or someone, out there, in the vast unknown. What did it mean? Was it friendly? Was it a trap? Or was it something else entirely, something they couldn't comprehend yet? She glanced over at Kira, who seemed to sense her uncertainty. "Emma, what do you think we should do? This is a chance to make history. It's bigger than any of us." Elon was still waiting for her response. His usual confidence was now tinged with doubt, and Emma could see that, despite everything he had achieved, he was just as uncertain as everyone else. They were standing on the edge of a precipice, staring into the unknown. "We don't know who or what sent that signal," Emma finally said, her voice steady. "But I think we have to go. We have to see what's out there. We can't ignore this." Elon nodded slowly. "You're right. This could be the beginning of something monumental. But we need to proceed with caution. We don't know what's waiting for us out there." Emma's mind was already racing ahead. If they were going to do this, they needed to be ready for anything. They needed to prepare for the unknown. But one thing was clear, they couldn't turn back now. "Let's start preparations," Emma said, her voice filled with determination. "We don't know what we're walking into, but we need to be ready." As the team began to work on the preparations for the journey, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that they were stepping into something far beyond their control. The signal, the response, the invitation, it was all too perfect, too precise. And it had come from a place that no one on Earth had ever reached. They were making history, no doubt about it. But Emma couldn't help but wonder, what was the cost of this journey? What would they find out there, and what would they bring back with them? The next few days were a blur of activity. Engineers worked on modifying the feather drive to handle the immense distance, while other teams began preparing the spacecraft for the long journey. Emma, Kira, and Elon worked side by side, trying to coordinate the various efforts. There was no room for error, this mission had to succeed. The launch was set for 3 days later. As the countdown began, Emma couldn't help but feel the weight of the moment. They were about to embark on a mission that no one had ever even considered, an expedition to an unknown part of the universe, following a signal from a source they couldn't even begin to comprehend. As she stood in the control room, staring at the countdown clock, Kira walked up to her, a concerned look on her face. "Are you okay?" Kira asked softly. Emma looked up at her, a forced smile on her lips. "I'm fine. Just a little nervous, I guess." Kira raised an eyebrow. "Nervous? You're the one who figured all of this out. You're the one who's been leading this mission from the start." Emma sighed. "I know. But it's different now. This isn't just about us anymore. This is bigger than anything we can control." Kira nodded, understanding. "It's a lot of pressure, isn't it?" Emma nodded. "Yeah. I just hope we're ready for what comes next." The countdown continued, and the room grew quieter as everyone focused on their tasks. The engineers checked and double-checked the spacecraft systems, making sure everything was in place for the journey. It was only a matter of time now. On the day of the launch, Emma stood alongside Elon and Kira in the control room, watching the monitors as the final systems checks were completed. The spacecraft, now fully equipped with the modified feather drive, was ready. The team had worked tirelessly to ensure that everything was in place, but there was still a sense of unease in the air. "Are we sure about this?" Kira asked quietly, her voice barely audible over the hum of the control room. Elon looked at her, a hint of a smile on his face. "We don't have a choice. The invitation is there. We have to answer it." Emma felt a surge of adrenaline as the final seconds ticked down. They had no idea what awaited them, but they had come this far, and there was no turning back. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, the countdown reached 0, and the room held its breath. Lift off. The spacecraft's engines roared to life, and Emma watched in awe as it slowly ascended from the ground, cutting through the atmosphere and into the vast expanse of space. The mission was officially underway. As the spacecraft hurtled through the stars, Emma's heart raced. She had always dreamed of space exploration, but this was different. This wasn't just about discovery. This was about answering a call from the unknown, and she had no idea what she would find when they reached their destination. Hours turned into days as the ship sped toward the coordinates provided by the mysterious signal. The crew worked in shifts, monitoring the systems and preparing for what was to come. Emma spent her time studying the data from the feather drive, making adjustments and ensuring that everything was operating at peak efficiency. But as the days passed, Emma began to notice something strange. The closer they got to the destination, the more the signal seemed to grow. It wasn't just a simple pulse anymore. It was alive. It was as if the signal was reaching out to them, pulling them forward. And then, one day, something unexpected happened. "Emma!" Kira shouted, her voice urgent. "You need to see this." Emma rushed over to Kira's station, her heart pounding in her chest. The signal was growing stronger, pulsing with a rhythm that seemed almost intentional. The pattern was unmistakable now. They were getting closer to something, someone, who was waiting for them. And then, without warning, the signal stopped. The room fell into complete silence as the engineers scrambled to analyze the sudden change. Emma's mind raced. "Did we lose it?" Kira asked, her voice trembling. Emma shook her head. "No, something's happening. Get ready." The monitors blinked, and then, in an instant, the ship's systems shut down. "Everything's going dark," one of the engineers shouted. "We've lost power." The room was plunged into darkness. The silence in the control room was suffocating. The hum of the spacecraft's systems had stopped. The monitors that had been showing a steady stream of data were now dark, the screens blank and lifeless. Emma stared at the black void in front of her, her mind racing. She could hear her own breath, but everything else seemed distant, unreachable. What happened? Kira's voice was tense, but Emma could hear the edge of panic creeping in. "I don't know," Emma replied, her voice quieter than she intended. "The systems are down. Everything is offline." Elon stood beside them, his eyes scanning the dead screens. He had always been the one to solve problems, but in that moment, it felt like even his vast knowledge couldn't explain what was happening. They had been so close to reaching their destination, but now, in the heart of space, they were stranded. "Try to restart the system," Elon ordered the engineers. "We need to get back online." The engineers scrambled to reboot the spacecraft's systems, their fingers flying over the controls, but nothing worked. The ship's power was completely drained, and there was no explanation for it. "We're not in danger," one of the engineers said, trying to reassure the team. "We still have the backup systems, but we need to figure out what caused the main power failure." Emma swallowed hard. The idea of being stranded in space, with no way to communicate with Earth, was terrifying. But that wasn't the most pressing issue right now. The real question was, why had everything stopped? What was happening around them? The engineers continued to work on restoring power, but time seemed to stretch on endlessly. Emma walked over to the window, staring out at the stars. They had been so close to reaching the place indicated by the signal. And now, everything had gone dark. She pressed her hand to the cold glass, trying to calm her racing thoughts. Something didn't feel right. There was an oppressive stillness outside, as if the entire universe had paused. The stars, once so bright, now seemed distant and cold, flickering in the blackness like forgotten memories. "Emma, what's going on?" Kira's voice interrupted her thoughts. Emma turned around, her face pale. "I don't know. But this doesn't feel like a coincidence. It's as if something out here is blocking us, keeping us from moving forward." Kira stepped closer, her eyes wide with concern. "You think it's the signal? Do you think we're being watched?" Emma hesitated. Could it be? Had they stumbled upon something that wasn't just sending a signal, but actively manipulating their journey? It seemed unlikely, but the evidence was hard to ignore. "I think we need to be careful," Emma said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We don't know who or what is on the other side of that signal. But I think they're aware of us. They're watching us." Just as Emma finished speaking, the communications panel flickered to life. The engineers were stunned, their eyes wide as a new message appeared on the screen. It was faint, almost distorted, but it was unmistakable. "It's coming from the coordinates," one of the engineers said, his voice shaky. "It's the same signal we were following." Emma's heart skipped a beat. They had been cut off, but the signal was still there. Someone, or something, was reaching out to them. But this time, the message wasn't just a string of data. It was something more. Something alive. Emma stepped forward, staring at the screen. The message was composed of strange symbols, unlike anything they had encountered before. But as she focused, she began to make out patterns. Each symbol seemed to pulse with a rhythm, like a heartbeat. "It's like a language," Emma whispered, her mind racing. "But not one we understand." Elon stepped up beside her, his face serious. "What do you think it means?" Emma bit her lip. "I don't know. But it's more than just a signal. It's almost like an invitation." She was sure of it now. They weren't just dealing with a mysterious force, they were being called, summoned. The question was, why? As the crew continued to examine the signal, another problem began to surface. The spacecraft had stopped moving. They were floating in space, but there was no indication of where they were. They had lost all navigation data. "We're in a completely unknown part of space," one of the engineers said, his voice trembling. "We've never mapped this area. There's nothing in our charts. It's like we're in a dead zone." Elon looked at the engineer, his eyes narrowing. "What do you mean by a dead zone?" "It's as if there's nothing here," the engineer explained. "No stars, no planets, just emptiness." Emma felt a chill run down her spine. She had always thought space was vast, endless, filled with the mysteries of the universe. But what if they had stumbled upon something different? Something beyond human comprehension. "We need to regain control," Elon said, his voice resolute. "We can't afford to stay adrift in this void. We need to find out what's going on." But as the engineers worked, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone. The silence outside the ship seemed unnatural. There was something out there, something watching them, waiting. Just as Emma began to process the implications of their situation, the ship shuddered. The lights flickered again, and the monitors began to beep frantically. The spacecraft was under attack, no, not from external forces, but from some unknown power that seemed to be manipulating their very systems. "What the hell is going on?" Kira shouted as the control panel sparked and fizzled. Emma's heart raced. She tried to stay calm. They had prepared for everything except this. "Keep calm." Elon barked, his voice sharp. "We need to stabilize the ship. Check the systems again." But as the crew scrambled to regain control, Emma noticed something else. The signal, the one they had been following, was growing stronger. It was no longer just a faint pulse. It was intensifying, radiating a powerful energy that seemed to be affecting everything around them. The ship's systems flickered once more, and then, with a sudden jolt, they were back online. But it wasn't the same. The moment the systems rebooted, Emma noticed a change in the atmosphere. The ship's internal sensors had detected a shift in the surrounding environment. Something had changed. "We're moving," one of the engineers said, his voice shaking. "We're accelerating, but there's no force. No engines. We're being pulled." Emma stared at the screen, her breath catching in her throat. The ship was being drawn toward something. Something unknown. "Where are we going?" Kira asked, her voice barely audible. "I don't know," Emma said, her voice tinged with awe. "But I think we're about to find out." The ship moved faster, pulled by an invisible force, its trajectory locked toward an unseen destination. The crew had no control. The universe was taking them on a journey they hadn't planned, and they had no idea where they would end up. The spacecraft surged forward, the motion so smooth and silent that it felt almost unnatural. Emma's heart raced as she watched the view screen, her eyes scanning the stars as they blurred past. The ship had no engines running, no external propulsion. They weren't moving by any conventional means, they were being pulled, helplessly, towards something in the dark abyss of space. "This is insane," Kira whispered, her voice tight with fear. "We have no control. What's happening to us?" Emma couldn't answer. She could feel it too, the ship was being guided by something, an unseen force pulling them deeper into the void. The stars outside began to stretch into strange patterns, flickering and distorting as if they were warping around an immense gravitational pull. "Is this the same place the signal came from?" Elon asked, his voice steady but filled with a trace of uncertainty. He stared at the monitors, his sharp mind working overtime to decipher what was happening. "We have to be getting close." Emma swallowed hard. "I think so. The signal is stronger. It's almost alive." The words felt wrong in her mouth, but they were the only way she could describe it. The signal was pulsating, alive with energy, and it was leading them toward something. Ahead, there was a distortion in space, something that didn't belong. The stars were twisting around a blackness, an absence that seemed to swallow light itself. It wasn't a black hole, not in the traditional sense, but something far more alien. "Get ready," Elon said, his voice suddenly filled with a sharp edge of command. "We don't know what's waiting for us on the other side." As the ship continued its journey toward the strange black void, Emma couldn't help but feel a deep sense of foreboding. They were on the edge of the unknown, heading towards something that no human had ever encountered, and yet the pull was irresistible. They had no choice but to follow it. The ship's sensors beeped urgently, and the engineers scrambled to analyze the data. "There's nothing on the other side," one of them reported. "Just darkness. No stars, no planets, just emptiness." Emma's stomach twisted. "Then what are we being pulled toward?" she whispered. The screen flickered again, and for a split second, Emma thought she saw something, movement, or perhaps a glimpse of light. But it was gone as quickly as it had appeared, replaced by the inky blackness that consumed everything in its path. Then, without warning, a voice boomed through the ship's intercom system. "Welcome." Emma froze, her breath catching in her throat. The voice was calm, yet filled with an authority that seemed to resonate through every part of the ship. It wasn't human, it was something else. Something ancient. The crew exchanged nervous glances. Elon's face was grim. "What the hell was that?" he muttered under his breath. "Was that the signal?" Kira asked, her voice trembling. Emma nodded slowly, her heart racing. "It's not just a signal. It's communication. They're reaching out to us." "But why?" The voice echoed again, cutting through the silence of the ship. "Come closer," it said. "You are expected." As the ship continued to move toward the dark core, the sense of unease grew stronger. The gravity of the situation was impossible to ignore. This wasn't just a new frontier in space exploration. They were about to step into something that could change everything, or destroy them entirely. Emma couldn't help but feel a strange pull toward the voice. It was as if it was calling to her, specifically. She had been the one to unlock the coordinates, to decipher the signal, and now she felt like she was being led down a path that only she could walk. "Stay alert," Elon said, his eyes scanning the monitors. "We don't know what we're walking into." The ship began to shudder slightly, as though it were encountering some kind of resistance, a force field, perhaps. The mysterious black void loomed closer, growing larger with each passing second. The crew had no control. They were helpless. Emma's mind raced. What could this be? Why had the signal led them here? And most importantly, what were they going to find? Without warning, the ship broke through the dark void. The distortion cleared in an instant, and they were suddenly in a new, strange environment. The stars outside were no longer the familiar pinpricks of light. They had been replaced by an expanse of swirling colors and shifting shapes, something entirely alien to their understanding. The ship was floating in a vast, glowing space, surrounded by an energy that seemed to pulse with life. The colors around them shifted in strange patterns, almost like a living organism moving with purpose. The crew was speechless. The view was breathtaking, yet terrifying in its alien beauty. It was as though they had crossed into a different realm, one completely outside their known universe. And in the center of it all, there was something massive. A structure, unlike anything they had ever seen. It hovered in the distance, its shape incomprehensible, made of materials that didn't resemble anything from Earth. This isn't possible," one of the engineers whispered, his eyes wide. "It's not even made of matter we know. It's something else entirely." Elon's voice was low, filled with awe. "We've crossed into something ancient. Something that predates everything we know. This is beyond science." Emma stared at the massive structure, her heart pounding. She felt a sudden, overwhelming sense of insignificance. Whatever this place was, it wasn't for them. They were intruders in a world far older, far more advanced than anything humanity could comprehend. And then, the voice spoke again. "You have arrived." The voice wasn't coming from the intercom anymore. It was everywhere, filling the ship with a sense of presence. It was as though it was in the room with them, standing right beside them, yet they couldn't see it. "What do you want from us?" Elon called out, his voice tight with both fear and curiosity. "Why did you bring us here?" There was a pause, a strange moment of silence that stretched on for too long. Then the voice answered, its tone almost amused. "You are the ones who followed the signal. You are the ones who sought the unknown. Now, you will learn." A massive energy field erupted in front of the ship, forming a portal, a doorway into the structure that loomed ahead. The ship's controls flickered once more, and Emma realized they were being pulled forward again. They were being led into the unknown. And there was no turning back now. The ship passed through the glowing portal, and for a moment, it felt like the world had shifted beneath their feet. The familiar hum of the spacecraft's systems returned, but everything else had changed. The air inside the ship felt different, charged with an energy that hummed in Emma's bones. She felt an electric shiver run down her spine as she stared out at the vast, alien structure that now loomed in front of them. It was enormous, stretching upward in impossible shapes that defied geometry, as if the laws of physics were different here. The surface shimmered with a strange, iridescent glow, pulsating in time with the mysterious energy around them. It wasn't just a building, it felt like a living organism, its surface writhing in strange patterns. "Where are we?" Kira whispered, her voice a mix of awe and fear. "This doesn't look like anything I've ever seen." Elon stepped forward, his gaze fixed on the structure. "I don't know. But we're not just here to look. We're here because we've been chosen." Emma felt the weight of Elon's words. Chosen? She wasn't so sure about that. If anything, they had stumbled into something far bigger than themselves, a force they couldn't comprehend. But they didn't have a choice now. They had followed the signal, and it had led them here, to this place. What was waiting for them on the other side of that structure? We need to go in, Elon said, his tone resolute. We came this far. We need to find out what's really going on. The air grew colder as they entered the structure, the temperature dropping rapidly. The ship's automatic doors opened with a soft hiss, and the crew stepped into what appeared to be a massive hall. The walls were lined with strange, undulating patterns, their surfaces shifting and changing in response to their presence. The entire space felt alive, as if the structure itself was aware of them, watching them closely. Stay close, Elon instructed, his voice tight with apprehension. We don't know what's ahead. The hall stretched out before them, far longer than they could see, with no end in sight. The path ahead seemed to be formed from light itself, the floor a swirling mix of colors and shapes. As they walked, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that they were being guided by some invisible force, pushed forward into the unknown. Suddenly, a voice echoed through the hall, just as it had before. You have come far, it said, its tone deep and resonant, filling the space. But this is only the beginning. The crew froze. The voice was everywhere, surrounding them, vibrating in their very bones. It wasn't a physical voice, yet it felt so real that it made Emma's heart race. What do you want from us? Elon called out, his voice unwavering, though his eyes flicked nervously around the hall. You have come seeking answers, the voice replied, its tone a mix of amusement and something darker, something older. But first, you must prove your worth. Before Emma could ask what that meant, the floor beneath them shifted. The swirling colors began to glow brighter, and a series of doors opened along the walls, each one leading to a different corridor. Choose, the voice instructed. You must pass through one of these trials to proceed. Fail, and you will be lost forever. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. Trials? What kind of trials? And why had they been chosen to face them? Emma felt her stomach tighten. She had no idea what they were about to encounter, but she could sense that this was no ordinary challenge. They were being tested by something far beyond their understanding. Elon stepped forward, his face grim. We don't have time to waste. We need to make a decision. Each door seemed to hold its own mystery. Some were bathed in a cold, blue light, while others flickered with the deep, red hue of something far more dangerous. There was one door that seemed to pulse with energy, a yellow-green glow flickering at its edges, and another that shimmered with an eerie silver sheen, as though it led to a world where time didn't exist. Which one should we choose? Kira asked, her voice trembling. I don't know, Elon replied. But we can't stand here forever. Before they could decide, Emma stepped forward. The light from the various doors seemed to call to her, pulling her toward one in particular, the one glowing with an almost unnatural, neon pink. It wasn't the brightest, nor the most imposing, but something inside Emma told her it was the right one. I think we should go this way, Emma said, her voice steady despite the fear in her chest. Elon looked at her, surprised. Are you sure? Emma nodded. I feel like this is where we need to go. I can't explain it, but it feels right. After a moment of hesitation, Elon nodded. Okay. We go through the pink door. Let's see what happens. As the crew passed through the pink door, they were met with a sudden shift in the environment. The air around them grew thick, almost suffocating, and the light dimmed to a haunting, pale hue. The path ahead seemed to stretch endlessly, but there was something strange about it. The walls seemed to pulse with an energy that made Emma's heart race. Stay close, Elon warned. Something's not right here. They walked forward in silence, each step heavier than the last, as if the air itself was trying to hold them back. The deeper they went, the more intense the feeling became. It was as if they were walking into the very heart of fear itself. And then, without warning, the voice returned. You seek answers, it said, its tone echoing through the space, but do you have the courage to face them? The ground beneath them trembled, and before Emma could react, the path ahead began to change. The walls dissolved into swirling clouds of shadow, and figures began to emerge from the darkness, shadowy, indistinct shapes that seemed to watch them, waiting for them to make a move. Who are they? Kira whispered, her voice filled with fear. The figures moved closer, their eyes glowing with an eerie light. Emma's pulse quickened. These weren't just figures. They were manifestations, embodiments of fear, doubt, and uncertainty. They were here to test them. One of the figures stepped forward. It was tall and imposing, its shape shifting and blurring like smoke. Its voice rang out, cold and accusing. Do you have the courage to continue? It asked. Do you have the courage to face the truth? Emma's mind spun. This wasn't just a test of strength or knowledge. It was a test of courage, of facing the deepest, darkest fears inside them all. She could feel the weight of her own doubts pressing in on her, could feel the uncertainty gnawing at her heart. Would they be able to face what lay ahead? The shadowy figure extended its hand, and Emma knew, deep down, that there was no turning back now. The crew had come this far. Now, they had to prove themselves. We have no choice, Emma said, her voice steady despite the fear that threatened to consume her. We have to face this. The dark figures surrounding Emma and the crew continued to loom, their eyes glowing with an otherworldly intensity. They were no longer mere shadows, they were tangible, made of pure, palpable fear. Emma's breath caught in her throat. She could feel the weight of their presence, pressing down on her like a physical force. For a moment, no one moved. The entire hall seemed to hold its breath, suspended in a moment of intense stillness. And then, the shadowy figure closest to Emma took a step forward. Its form seemed to flicker and twist, as if it were made of smoke and mirrors. The voice that emerged was deep, full of weight and inevitability. Do you truly wish to know what lies ahead? It asked, its tone like ice against her skin. Are you prepared to see the truth? Emma felt a shiver run down her spine, but she stood tall, refusing to let the figure intimidate her. They had come this far, and they couldn't stop now. Yes, she said firmly, her voice unwavering. We need to know. The figure tilted its head, its glowing eyes studying her. Very well. But understand this, the truth you seek may shatter everything you thought you knew. The air grew colder, and a low hum filled the space around them. Emma's eyes flickered to Elon, Kira, and the others. They were all standing a little taller now, a little more resolute. They had all come to this point together, and no matter what they encountered, they would face it as a team. The figure raised its hand, and the entire hall seemed to ripple. The walls dissolved, revealing a vast, swirling expanse of light and shadow. The image shifted like a hologram, taking shape in front of them, a vision. Emma gasped. It was Earth. But it wasn't the Earth she knew. This world was different. It was fractured, torn apart. The cities were crumbling, and the oceans had receded into vast, empty deserts. The sky was thick with smoke and ash. There was no life, only decay. This is your future, the shadowy figure said, its voice heavy with sorrow. The future you have created. Emma's heart pounded in her chest. No, this can't be, she struggled to find the words. What is this? This is the consequence of your actions, the figure replied. The relentless pursuit of progress, of technology, without understanding the costs. This is where your civilization is headed. Elon stepped forward, his face pale. What do you mean? This is a result of our actions. The figure nodded. Yes. The unchecked exploitation of resources. The race for power and control. The disregard for nature and the delicate balance that sustains life. All of this will lead to the destruction of your world. Emma's breath caught in her throat. She had always believed that humanity's exploration of space, the search for new frontiers, was the key to saving their future. But now, standing in the face of this vision, she could see the cost of such ambition. "We didn't know," Kira whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. "We didn't know what we were doing." "You did not understand," the figure said, its tone softening slightly. "But now, you are being given a choice. You can change this future. But first, you must understand the true cost of your actions." The vision of Earth faded, replaced by a swirling vortex of light. In the center of the vortex, Emma could see an object, a small, glowing sphere. It pulsed with an energy that seemed to resonate with the very fabric of the universe. "This is the key," the figure said. "The key to saving your world. The key to undoing the damage you have done." Emma's gaze fixed on the sphere. It was beautiful, shimmering with a strange, otherworldly light, but it also felt heavy, burdened with untold consequences. She stepped closer to it, feeling an intense pull, a sense of destiny. "What do we have to do?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The figure's voice grew even more somber. "You must make a sacrifice. The power contained within this sphere can restore balance to your world, but it will require everything you hold dear." Emma frowned. "What do you mean? A sacrifice?" The figure didn't answer immediately. Instead, the light from the sphere flickered, and Emma saw flashes of images, a vision of her friends, her family, her life. She saw herself, a girl on Earth, with a future full of possibility. But she also saw the world unraveling, torn apart by war, climate disaster, and chaos. She felt the weight of the decision pressing down on her. It wasn't just about saving the world, it was about what she was willing to give up to make it happen. Elon spoke up, his voice rough with emotion. "What will happen if we don't do anything?" The figure's eyes glowed brighter. "If you do nothing, your world will continue down the path of destruction. There is no turning back." "But if we do nothing," Emma said, her voice trembling with the enormity of the decision, "how do we know it will work? How do we know that?" The figure cut her off. "There is no certainty. But sometimes, the only way forward is through the unknown. And you, Emma, are the one who must make that choice." Emma stood there, frozen in place. She had never felt more alone in her life. This wasn't just about technology or science. It was about life and death, about everything she had ever known, everything she had ever hoped for. The figure's voice was gentle now, almost kind. "You are the key. But you must decide what price you are willing to pay." The crew stood in silence, the air thick with tension. The room seemed to close in around them. Emma felt her heart pounding, her mind racing. She couldn't do this. She was just a child. She wasn't supposed to carry the weight of the world on her shoulders. But the figure's words echoed in her mind, "You are the key." She thought of her family, her friends, all of humanity. She thought of everything she had worked for, everything she had fought for. She had wanted to save the world, to make a difference. But could she truly bear the cost? I don't know if I can do this," Emma whispered, her voice breaking. The figure's response was calm, almost compassionate. "The future is not written in stone. But if you do not act, you may not have the chance to write it at all." The room fell silent. Time seemed to stretch on forever. Emma's gaze flickered between the glowing sphere and her companions. She couldn't do this alone. But perhaps, together, they could make the decision that would change everything. The glowing sphere hovered before them, its radiant light pulsing like a heartbeat. Emma stood there, heart racing, every fiber of her being straining against the weight of the decision that hung in the air. The shadowy figure loomed beside them, its eerie, glowing eyes never leaving her. The power of the sphere seemed to call to her, pulling at her in ways she didn't understand. The voice of the figure echoed once more, deep and resonant, "You must decide, Emma. The future of your world rests in your hands." Elon, Kira, and the rest of the crew stood close behind her, their faces pale with fear and uncertainty. Each of them had their own internal battles, struggling with what this could mean, not just for them, but for everyone they cared about. Could they sacrifice everything they loved to restore balance to a world on the brink of destruction? Emma hesitated, looking around at the people who had become like family to her over the course of this impossible journey. I'm just a kid. I don't know if I'm strong enough to make this decision. The figure's gaze softened, just slightly. Strength does not come from age. It comes from the willingness to face the unknown. She swallowed hard, the words hanging in the air. What was she supposed to do? How could she make this decision for the entire world? What if she chose wrong? What if everything they had gone through was for nothing? Elon stepped forward, his voice steady but laced with emotion. Emma. You've always been the one who saw things clearly. When I couldn't, you were the one who pointed us in the right direction. I believe in you. Tears stung Emma's eyes, but she wiped them away, trying to focus. She had always looked up to Elon, admired him, but this was something so much bigger than all of them. What do we have to do? She asked, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and resolve. The figure's voice resonated with finality. You must take the sphere and release its power into the core of your world. It will restore balance, but the cost is your connection to it. You will never be the same. Emma stepped closer to the sphere, her mind spinning. She could feel the heat radiating from it, a pulse of energy so intense that it made her chest ache. This was it. The moment of truth. Her hand hovered over the sphere, the weight of the decision crashing down on her. What does it mean? Kira whispered, her voice barely audible. What does it mean to give up our connection to it? The figure's voice, now almost a whisper, filled the room. Once the power is released, the world will be saved, but the cost will be the end of your journey with this power. The knowledge, the energy, all of it will fade away from you. It will be like it never existed. You will not remember the journey you've taken. Memory, Emma murmured, trying to process it. But, will we still know each other? Will I still know them? Your relationships will remain, the figure replied. But the events, the experiences that brought you here, will fade into the past. The price is your awareness of this moment. Emma felt the weight of the decision, and for the first time, she truly understood what sacrifice meant. It wasn't just about giving something up, it was about choosing the greater good over personal gain. She had already learned so much during this journey. But if this was the only way to save the world, to preserve the future, she would do it. With one deep breath, Emma placed her hand on the glowing sphere. Instantly, an overwhelming flood of energy surged through her. It was as if the very fabric of the universe was bending to her touch, as if all of existence was holding its breath, waiting for her next move. In that instant, everything changed. The hall around them dissolved, replaced by a bright, blinding light that filled her vision. She felt herself pulled in every direction, her body weightless as the power surged through her. The world, her world, seemed to shift, reforming around her as the energy inside the sphere connected with the very heart of the planet. Time seemed to stretch and twist. The force of the energy was too much to bear, and Emma cried out, her voice lost in the endless sea of light. The light faded. The world grew still. When Emma opened her eyes, she was standing in the middle of the once crumbling earth, only, now it was different. The cities that had been destroyed were being rebuilt. The skies had cleared, and the oceans, once dried up, were returning to their natural state. The world was healing, slowly but surely, but it was healing. The crew stood around her, just as they had before, but they seemed different. No one spoke for a long time, as if the weight of what had just happened was too much to comprehend. Finally, Kira spoke, her voice soft, yet filled with awe. Emma. It's working. Elon, his eyes wide, looked around in disbelief. We did it. We actually did it. Emma felt the loss, the emptiness in her mind. The memories of the journey, the trials, the moments they had shared, it was all fading. Like a dream slipping away as she awoke. But she knew one thing for certain, they had saved the world. The future was now a blank slate, ready to be written. As the crew gathered around, Emma looked at each of them. She felt a connection to them, but it was different now. She couldn't remember the specifics of their journey, but she could feel the bond they shared, a bond that transcended memory. She looked up at Elon. Did we really do it? He smiled, though his eyes were tinged with sadness. Yes, we did. And the world is better for it. For a moment, Emma felt a strange calm settle over her. The uncertainty, the fear, it was all gone now. All that remained was the knowledge that she had made the right choice. That they had made the right choice. Together. And as they turned to face the future, Emma knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The world was healing. A new era was beginning. The world had changed, but the weight of it didn't sink in all at once. Emma stood on the edge of a once barren field, now slowly regrowing with lush grass and vibrant flowers, the air fresher than it had ever been before. She had saved this planet, but the path forward wasn't clear. The price of that power still echoed inside her, even if the memories had faded. As Emma glanced around at the new world, the one she had fought so hard to save, the realization hit her. There was still so much to be done. The world was healing, but it wasn't perfect. There were still cracks to mend, still wounds to heal. The people who had once lived in a decaying, doomed world now stood on the precipice of an unknown future. They had all been given a second chance, but what would they do with it? Emma wasn't sure. She couldn't remember everything that had led them here, but she knew this, she had done what needed to be done. And though her connection to the sphere and the power it had granted them was gone, she could still feel a new sense of purpose, something inside her that told her she had to help others rebuild. The world was better, but there was still work to be done. Behind her, Elon, Kira, and the others gathered. There was a quiet calm among them, but also a shared sense of uncertainty. They had accomplished the impossible, and yet, what now? What was next? Kira was the first to break the silence. Her voice was soft, but filled with a quiet determination. We did it. The world is healing, but, where do we start? Elon, always the visionary, scanned the horizon, as though trying to map out their next steps in his mind. We start by helping. This isn't just about technology and innovation, it's about people, communities, and restoring balance. We can't just jump into space and explore anymore, not without understanding the fragility of the world we've nearly destroyed. Emma nodded slowly. She didn't have all the answers, but she knew that rebuilding a broken world would take more than just knowledge, it would take care, compassion, and the kind of leadership that came from people willing to make sacrifices, just like they had. We'll have to teach, Elon continued, his voice gaining strength. Teach the people of this world to value sustainability, to nurture the earth, and to create a future where technology and nature coexist. The mistakes we made must be the lessons of tomorrow. But, Kira interjected, her brow furrowed, how can we even begin to make those changes? We don't have the answers, and the knowledge we had, her words trailed off, the loss of memory still an unsettling presence. Emma could feel the uncertainty in the air. They had saved the world, but they had no clear roadmap for rebuilding it. We don't need to know everything, Emma said quietly. We just need to start. We have each other, and that's more than enough. Elon looked down at her, a soft smile forming at the edges of his lips. You're right. We'll rebuild, one step at a time. The days that followed were filled with action and planning. Emma and the crew worked with world leaders, scientists, and everyday people to share the lessons they had learned about balance, sustainability, and the interconnectedness of all things. The technology they had developed was repurposed, not for further exploration, but for restoration. The once dying ecosystems that had been ravaged by human greed were now being nurtured back to life. Rivers that had dried up were slowly filling once again. Forests that had been destroyed by reckless logging were beginning to regrow, as people planted trees by the millions. Entire cities were being rebuilt, this time with a focus on sustainability. Solar panels, wind turbines, and green spaces became as commonplace as streets and buildings. But as they worked, Emma noticed something strange. Though the world was changing for the better, there was an undercurrent of fear, of suspicion. People had been through so much, and while many were eager to embrace the new future, there were others who resisted. There were whispers of those who believed that they had been manipulated, that the sacrifice had come at too great a cost. "What are we really rebuilding?" one man asked as he stood at a conference in New York, addressing Elon and the others. "We've lost so much. And now you want us to rebuild, but at what price? What is the real cost of this new world you're proposing?" Elon paused, his face grave. "I understand your fear. But this isn't about power or control. It's about survival. About ensuring that our future, your future, doesn't end the same way it began." The man shook his head. "You think this is enough? That the world can just go back to normal?" Emma stepped forward, her small frame still surprising in its ability to command attention. She didn't have the same years of experience as Elon, but she had learned something important during their journey. "We're not trying to make things normal again," she said, her voice clear. "We're making them better. This isn't about perfection. It's about growth. And sometimes, to grow, you need to face the hardest truths about yourself." The crowd fell silent, some eyes widening with recognition, others skeptical, but none unmoved by the sincerity of her words. Emma had learned that sometimes, the truth was uncomfortable, but it was the only way forward. But as the days passed, it became clear that the road to healing wouldn't be as easy as they had hoped. A new threat began to emerge, one that none of them had anticipated. It wasn't a physical danger, but a psychological one. The very people they had fought to save were beginning to turn on each other. There were those who had embraced the changes, who believed in the power of collaboration and community. But there were also factions forming, groups of people who refused to let go of their old ways. Some clung to power, while others sought to undermine the progress that had been made. "We can't let this happen," Kira said, her voice tense. "We've come so far. We've made such progress, but this infighting, it could tear everything apart." Elon nodded, his face clouded with concern. "We have to address this, before it's too late." Emma, though only a child, understood something the others didn't. "We need to remind them of why we did this. We need to make them see that the fight wasn't just about survival, it was about creating something better for everyone. We can't let them forget the lessons we learned." But deep down, Emma knew that the true challenge wasn't rebuilding the world. It was rebuilding trust between people, between nations, and between themselves. The world was healing. The earth was slowly returning to its former glory, and the people who had nearly destroyed it were now working to preserve it. But Emma knew that the journey was far from over. There was still much to be done, and the lessons they had learned must continue to be passed on. And so, as the sun set on a new day, Emma stood with Elon and the crew, gazing out at the world they had saved. The sky was clear, the air fresh, and for the first time in a long time, hope seemed real. The work had just begun, but Emma was ready. They all were. For this was no longer the story of a 10-year-old girl who had outsmarted one of the greatest minds of the age. This was the story of a new world, a world built on the foundations of sacrifice, hope, and the belief that even the smallest among us could make the greatest difference. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?